Wonderful, thank you so much, and thanks for DLD to make this possible. And well, we have a big question to ponder. Can we teach AI human values? And my monkey-wrenching journalist mind, of course, comes up with the second question: do we want to teach AI human values? So, do you think that's a good idea to teach AI human values?
Well, yes, I think it is a good idea to teach the values of cooperation, of empathy, of not harming each other. But I think the point that you made, which is very important, is that even as human beings across cultures and countries, we find it difficult to agree on what is a human value. And so when we build these machines, it's important to actually be able to have a consistent kind of worldwide approach to ethics and human values that can be adopted by across all companies and governments.
Right. Yeah, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with a few caveats. First of all, the more we teach AI about humans, the better manipulator it becomes. So there's like this one obvious caveat. Second is that we shouldn't teach it the human values as of 2019. Our values keep changing. There's like moral progress that we have been making. We no longer think that it's a good idea to kind of put cats on fire, and there's a good reason for that. Now, so like instead of teaching human values as they are now, we should kind of try to create an AI with a job of figuring out what humans would want if we were smarter and our values have more converged.
I also wonder, you both have you have a big advantage towards me. I mean, you're coming from a programming background and you know how these machines really work. I mean, first of all, isn't that the basic problem that so few people actually know how these machines work and how algorithms work? What is it? Is it kind of a black box that we should be able to open first before we release it onto humans?
Look, I don't think that the deep plumbing of these algorithms needs to be understood by everyone, just like we don't necessarily understand how planes work or cars work. But I do think that treating it as a black box and encouraging this myth of artificial intelligence as a science fiction movie that's happening to people disempowers them. It makes them feel helpless. And we should teach some of the basic concepts of artificial intelligence to all citizens. That's why I have a charity in Singapore, and we teach basics of artificial intelligence to girls across the country. And the idea really is to give them the confidence that even if they are not going to be AI engineers or computer programmers, they can collaborate with them, they can probe them, they have enough confidence to challenge them and together kind of contribute to the products and services that are being built. So I think this idea of maintaining human agency vis-a-vis the machine versus being passively subjected to whatever the AI is doing is really important.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's this term called transparency in AI, which is an important thing. And it's also important for two reasons. One is that to give like an idea, to give like some kind of solid model to humans who don't know the plumbing, as you say. That's one important thing. But probably in the longer run, it's even more important so we would have an idea what could go wrong. So if we just kind of swipe a bunch of the functionality in there, like, oh, we don't actually know what's happening, it's just optimizing something, we might repeat the mistake that evolution did. It was creating something, but didn't really get what it wanted in some sense.
So in a lot of these...
Sorry,
yeah?
I wanted to ask Jaan, because I think that's a really important point that you raised, this importance of transparency. And I also sit on many panels with, now you've gone into philanthropy, but with executive, and they all talk about transparency and ethics. But when they go back, and it's a trade-off between efficiency, accuracy, and interpretability, which is what often happens, they always prioritize the business use case. And I don't know kind of how to convince them to do otherwise.
Well, Stuart Russell, who is the leading voice about AI safety, especially long-term safety in academia. He says that the day when a first household robot cooks a cat will be a really bad day for the robotics industry indeed. So it's kind of short-sighted to not focus on safety and transparency.
I mean, I agree with you. I just found that, I mean, in Singapore and in Asia, because there's so much emphasis on the bottom line, the P&L, I think it's very, very important to keep bringing this up. And one of the ways that we're seeing it happen is that governments are putting out regulations. In Singapore, we have a government on ethics and AI, and we're trying to emulate that in other countries in Asia to a degree. And I think that's going to change the conversation a little bit.
But doesn't that mean that we have to basically reform the markets and how they work and the market dynamics and the growth model at the same time that we approach the next phase of digitalization? I mean, wasn't one of the problems for Facebook, for example, I mean, everybody's been talking about Facebook this week, isn't one of the problems of Facebook that it has to answer to the market, and that it basically, since it went public, the trouble started? So don't we have to reform the market at the same time we approach digitalization in a more educated way?
Yeah, so some AI companies are actually already aware of that. Like one investor in a Californian company called Vicarious, and at one, I think it was round A or round B, they actually kind of changed their corporate charter. They kind of switched from this Corp C or whatever to I kind of forget what's the term, but there's actually a form of entrepreneurship where you're not, you cannot be held liable for not maximizing the profits.
Right. Okay. I think that's an American. It's an American thing, which brings also.
But I guess just a sort of more general answer is that yes, we need to think about. We need to think hard about trade-offs between profit maximization and something that's actually good for the world, and then like regulatorily. Like how regulators and whatnot provide tools for addressing this trade-off.
This one of the ways to manage this trade-off may be to empower people. So, for example, in Asia, people are just getting their mobile phones. They're more and more all the time on the internet. They're on Facebook. And from the start, from their initial exposure has been that it's okay for companies to take your data and use algorithms to manipulate you. They may not realize that. But I think that if, for example, if governments had a citizen bank, data bank at least, where you could see all your information, you could see some trends, you could analyze your own behavior as far as the government collecting your data, which you should have access to, I think subtly these are signals for the general population where they'll become used to it and then hopefully start demanding such accountability from corporations as well. These are not things that people just hear about and change their mind. These are habits almost that have to be formed.
Also, I just was at the conference in Puerto Rico organized by Future of Life Institute, one of the institutes that I co-founded. And there's like one proposal among many things that was discussed there is called so-called windfall clause. So the idea is to have companies insert in their charters a clause that what happens if my profits exceed like 1 trillion per year? So like the idea is that it's very cheap to include them because nobody expects that to happen. But if it happens, then we should have some like something that would benefit everyone, not just this company.
Right. So, I mean, coming back to the original question, can we teach AI human values? I mean, in all these debates, we always treat this as if it's kind of a science fiction event. AI is arriving now, and we as humankind have to respond, whilst it's probably more a next step in the technological progress that has been started. I mean, it probably started in the 50s with Marvin Minsky. So, is it even possible to ask this, can we teach AI human values, because aren't the values in different places also different? I mean, we have now three big competing blocks. We have Europe, we have America, with Asia, all vying for being the AI superpower. I mean, look at you started two great institutions. You started the Future of Life Institute in America, and you started this Center for the Study of Existential Risk in Europe. I mean, just the two titles seem to reflect the mentalities, how we approach AI on these two continents. So and I mean, to take Asia, how is AI approached in Asia? Is it an existential risk? Is it the future of life? Or is it something else?
I think, unfortunately, Asia is still very focused on pragmatism. I mean, it is good because, in one respect, because we see so many problems around us. Access to healthcare, to good transportation, to education. All of the cost of these services and mass access to them can be improved with artificial intelligence. But there isn't such a lot of criticism as people are moving up into the middle class. And 5 people move into the middle class every second in the world. The majority of them happen to be in developing countries. And they haven't necessarily, the majority of them don't have the critical thinking yet to understand what this might mean for especially their ability to be manipulated by certain kinds of algorithms. However, now we're seeing a change. Now we're seeing, because of this, some of the conversations that are happening in the West, there's much more interest in it in areas like the Philippines, which is trying to copy GDPR, or in Singapore that set up a committee, or even in China where there is some conversation about that. So I think that we'll see a bit of the change. And I think that, and I hope you do, in a lot of these Future of Life institutes and others, I often see they're all men, and they're all kind of from the West. But I think we need more diversity, and we definitely need more Asians, Africans, and others in the conversation, too.
In fact, I agree. In fact, the conference we had in Puerto Rico, it was the 3rd in series, best one, by the way. One of the topics there was to kind of, to extend, to have the audience to be more diverse. So first time we had a significant delegation from China, 1 person from Japan, 1 from Russia, and a few Indians, I think.
And some women.
I mean, there are a lot of people, sort of diverse people from the West, of course.
That's great.
But wouldn't that be a first step to approach AI, that if we want to teach them AI human values, that we first of all have a diverse group of developers and entrepreneurs to even develop it, because, I mean, different experiences will feed AI different values.
Yeah, although I don't think this is the most efficient ways to feed AI diverse values. For example, imagine we definitely want AI to have children's interests in mind. That doesn't mean we should have children start developing AI. So I think there's value in what you just said, but also it's important to kind of differentiate the competence that's needed to develop aligned AI and the input that people can have into what, the best way to decide where a rocket should go is not to have everyone start developing this rocket. It's just have a mechanism that would actually gather the input from people and then have some voting mechanism or something that would then feed into this rocket building process. Mm-hmm. Also, I think that to your earlier question, I think people are kind of overplaying the amount of difference that we have between cultures. Sure, we have differences between cultures. But one important point is that almost all human values are common. And the fact that they are common basically makes those invisible from us. Again, as Stuart Russell says, that everyone likes their right leg. But we don't have international discussions and conferences about the value of right legs. Because we just think it's obvious. This is not obvious to AI. It's also not obvious to AI that it's valuable to have oxygen in the atmosphere or have the planet roughly at room temperature. AI doesn't care about that. That's why we send it to space.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's kind of a 2-lane approach, right? So right now we're in the near term where there are many, many engineers who are working on these problems. And then kind of what you're talking about, to build a rocket of the future, that's when we have to invest in this deep research or fundamental research. And the company that I run, we have, more than half of them are academics. So I learn a lot from them about the research that they're doing. But one of the things I've noticed in the companies that we consult is that the engineers who are building these artificial intelligence systems, for some reason, nobody educates them on either how it connects to the business properly, or even some of the ethical and other kinds of values, we kind of miss this whole middle management that's building the very infrastructure of our cities, especially in the developing world. And I think this kind of elitism is very important to move away from that. Yes, it's very important for fundamental research to continue, and that is the one that will drive us forward. But these systems are being put in place today across the world, and we also need to make sure there is no bias in them either.
But especially when it comes to engineering, I mean, I think that is a very important point to make. I mean, the developers should probably be the first to be taught human values so they can actually apply them too. And
or they should buy into some kind of mechanism that will promote human values, yes.
They should buy into
some mechanism.
Okay.
Like, just like this windfall clause is just like one example of a mechanism that would hopefully promote human values. So if they buy into that okay, like if we are here like doing this like really great hedge fund AI here, but like okay, our management says that we should put this like windfall clause in there. Like okay, so let's just put it, and it's like that's an example of buying into a mechanism that would promote human values or like well-being.
I personally I'm an optimist. I think if AI and global warming are probably the two big debates about for the 21st century, and we look at the 20th century where the two debates were biotech and nuclear, and I think nuclear went terribly wrong and biotech went very well, and you actually, with the Future of Life Institute, you hooked into that because, I mean, biotech went well because there was the Asilomar conference where all biotech people in 1975 agreed upon a global standard. Now, in 2017, your Future of Life Institute had another Asilomar conference, and you came up with the 23 guidelines for AI, for ethical AI. So does Asilomar, something like the Asilomar guidelines, does it resonate in Asia? Or is it something that is now basically only debated in America? I mean, is this something that resonated there, or was...
It would resonate there.
It would?
I think it would, but I mean, there's just not enough discussion at the moment.
But there is some, like for example, last year, I think it was last year, when Tencent Research published a book about AI and included an entire chapter about AI ethics and safety, and also listed the Asilomar AI principles there.
I mean, I think Asians, Africans, Latin Americans, we are just growing in our own confidence to make decisions for ourselves also, instead of having Western companies, et cetera, come in and put their business models. They have to be tailored to the local context. But as Jaan said, these issues of human values are as pertinent to us and are kind of universal. And they're very interested, and in the universities, there's a great deal of interest in this as we increase the talent pool in data science and artificial intelligence in countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, India. You know, people that you would not expect are at the forefront, but I think we'll see great innovation there because the majority of people that are going to be affected by AI happen to live in these regions.
I mean, Europeans look at Asia in a kind of ambivalent way. On the one hand, everybody here envies you for the entrepreneurial liberties, for the kind of governmental muscle that goes into research, and also money, and for like kind of the thriving spirit. On the other hand, of course, everybody's in horror. I mean, the most famous example is the social ranking system in China, but also, I mean, you work in Singapore. Singapore is known as being a very controlling and surveillance society. So, is there something that we don't get over here? What's happening there? And where is this thrust going? Would this be a different thrust where AI is geared towards?
Yeah, I think like one thing, I was in Beijing in May, and that kind of almost always surprises me when I go to China. I mean, I grew up behind the Iron Curtain, and I kind of prepare myself for this kind of environment there, but it's always I see like much more sort of open discussion there than I ever saw in Soviet Union. And also there was discussion about social score, and so I think it still might go horribly wrong. I'm not saying that it's an ideal thing, but there seems to be discussion, and I think like it's made a little bit of a scapegoat in the West. It's like something that's kind of very ideologically easy to point to. The fact is that Chinese do have problems. They're culturally they are low trust society. It's kind of hard to trust people who are not your relatives. So like they need some kind of tool for that, as far as I understand. I'm not an expert in China.
I mean, I think there's also just the fact that they are densely populated cities. There's security issues. There is other infrastructure issues. So you have to understand the context in which certain kind of decisions are made. If you're from a country that has only 5 million people or 2 million, even 30 million, you can't imagine a country that has to be governed, has 1 billion people in it. That's one thing. The other thing is that actually there's a lot of optimism and youth, and as a result, all the rebellion that comes with it, and all the debate and internal, ramblings of the mind. And there are 100 million people, under young people just in Pakistan alone. And so it's very elitist or patronizing to think that they're not wondering about how some of these technologies are going to be used, and that they're not building their own technologies either. But I think what they would benefit from is more collaboration and discussion with the West. And I think the West would benefit from understanding them better as well.
Mm-hmm. And is there basically a divide? I mean, for example, I see that, we do have social ranking systems in the West digitally already in place already. I mean, if you're an Uber driver, you're very socially ranked every day, or even if you're selling on eBay, you're socially ranked every day. Is there this feeling that there's a hypocrisy in this debate in Asia?
Sorry, is there what?
Is there the feeling that there's a hypocrisy in this debate, and that it should be more a global debate about?
I think there's still difference between small-scale reputational systems and something that you enforce on the government level. So in that sense, the concerns about having a dystopian situation happening in China, they are justified. On the other hand, it's not obvious that it will end up as a dystopia.
So. Again, since you both come from a programming background and you can teach me a lot, is it even possible to teach human values to a binary system? I mean, isn't a computer always looking for the ultimate result, for the ultimate truth, whilst humans are always, maybe that's a German thing, but full of doubt and contradictions?
No, it's very easy to make an AI system full of doubt. You just, instead of probabilities, you use probability distributions and that's it.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree?
In fact, there's a technology review article just on this, on how you could potentially add uncertainty into the decision by giving, and that would actually throw the answer back to the human being, for example, to make it. So you can make it, instead of very rule-based, where it always gives you the answer, and it does so with various levels of confidence anyway, that you can actually include certain uncertainties in the answer as well.
Right. And you saw the dangers of AI, the possible dangers of AI very early on, and you addressed them very early on. Now, I think the whole debate this week about Facebook showed you how basically society made huge mistakes with the primitive form of AI coupled with the hive mind. And I don't know, Facebook is now becoming kind of like the chain smoking of the digital realm. So society seems to react naturally and have kind of self-healing powers. Do you think these self-healing powers are enough for the problems that we will be facing with AI?
Yeah. I think they help, but I think the danger there is that they are not really representative of the problems that we might be facing. But yeah, sure, it's good that people are kind of seeing that AI comes with its own baggage.
Okay. What are the possible dangers that we're facing?
So myself, I'm really concerned about AIs that are general. So it's like, if you think about it, evolution was just trying to build self-replicators. It wasn't trying to build general reasoners. General reasoning just happened to be something that was useful as a tool. So like that is also one of my concerns, that like what happens once we go beyond like just sort of narrow AIs that are focused on optimizing advertising or image recognition of self-driving cars, and either as a deliberate effort or some kind of side effect, get something that is able to reason across like many different domains. We get that some of that already, like with AlphaZero, for example. It's the first time when you have just one computer program that can play pretty much any perfect information game, which is like a new regime in terms of generality that the world is in.
Yes, I would agree. I think that that's one thing. But even in the near term, what I worry about is manipulation. I mean, with algorithms that can simulate other people, and especially with children and toys, or little social robots that we are going to increasingly be surrounded by in smart homes. I think that our children are very vulnerable to this kind of manipulation as it becomes more intelligent, especially. And so that worries me as a mom and as somebody who has young children. So I think that both in the near term and in the far future, as it becomes smarter and then starts to learn, like intelligence learns just from playing itself, for instance, in the case of Go, I think that there are safety measures that we need to put in.
By the way, like one safety measure that has been discussed in AI safety community is perhaps building AIs that are powerful but that have no idea that humans exist. So you get this additional oversight of a system that's not aware that there's something that can oversee it. But like the problem is that if you build an AI to have really good idea of what humans are and what they want and how they function, it's very hard to debug that system, because like this system has an idea what the debuggers are. And yeah.
So do you both think general AI will be a reality?
Eventually, yes, unless we screw up some other way.
Okay.
I think so, yeah, but I don't know how far in the future it is. But I mean, seriously, just working in the last couple of years with my team, I'm just shocked at the amount of progress that's being made in the field, but secondly, how fast companies are adopting it. So I think that's the other reason why it's so important to have this conversation now. When I first started in Asia 2 years ago, very few large companies wanted to adopt artificial intelligence. But now we get a call every other day from one of the major players who have millions of customers, hundreds of millions of customers in the region.
Exactly. The AI has kind of progressed in summers and winters, so-called. But this summer is different in a sense that now we can make money with AI, so we shouldn't expect it to end. So
just to round this up, should we be optimistic about the future AI? Do we have the debate early enough or not?
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, yes.
Cautiously optimistic?
I'm optimistic.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. We're out of time. And we should continue this conversation for the next coming years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.